She lost her husband, and instead of comfort, her in-laws threw her and her twins out into the cold. What they didn't know was that she was the rightful heir to a $200 million fortune. This story will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Hargrove townhouse, lighting up the kitchen where Amelia stood barefoot, her hair loosely tied back, humming as she stirred pancake batter. At her feet, two identical pairs of little legs darted across the tiles, her twin boys, Noah and Nathan, laughing as they chased each other around the stools. "Careful, you two," Amelia laughed, balancing the wooden spoon as one of them nearly crashed into her. From the doorway, Daniel leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching with a smile that made Amelia's heart still skip, even after years of marriage. His dark hair was messy from sleep, and his shirt hung untucked, but to Amelia, he was perfect. "You've got chaos under control, I see," he teased, walking over to plant a kiss on her cheek. She rolled her eyes playfully. "Says the man who promised he'd get them ready for school today." Daniel grinned, scooping up one of the twins. "I was supervising. There's a difference." This was their life. Not glamorous, not extravagant, despite Daniel's family's enormous wealth, but simple, happy, and full of love. Amelia had grown up with little, raised by a single mother, and she never cared about the expensive cars or sprawling estates Daniel's family flaunted. She only cared about the man who never let her feel small in their shadow. Daniel always told her, "You are my world, Amelia. Not the money, not the name, just you." And she believed him. But happiness has a cruel way of slipping through fingers too soon. It was late evening when the knock came at the door. Amelia, tidying up toys, frowned at the unexpected sound. When she opened it, her heart dropped. Two police officers stood there, hats in their hands, expressions somber. "Mrs. Hargrove?" one asked gently. "Yes," her voice wavered. "There's been an accident." The world slowed. The words blurred, but the pieces pierced through. Car crash. Drunk driver ran a red light. He didn't make it. Amelia's knees buckled. The twins ran to her side, confused as she collapsed on the floor, her sobs filling the room. Her husband, her anchor, her love, was gone. That night, as she held her boys close in bed, Amelia whispered over and over, "I'll keep you safe. I promise. I'll keep us together." But she didn't know that this was only the beginning, that grief would soon be joined by betrayal, and that her fight for survival had just begun. The funeral came too quickly. A week after the accident, Amelia found herself standing in the shadow of the towering Hargrove family chapel, clutching the hands of her twins. She wore a simple black dress, her face pale, her eyes swollen from nights of weeping. The air smelled of lilies and polished wood, yet beneath the fragrance lingered something sharp and unkind, the weight of judgment. Daniel's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove, stood at the front, stone-faced, greeting guests. Their wealth was displayed in every corner. Crystal chandeliers, imported marble floors, pews filled with politicians, businessmen, and society's elite. To Amelia, it felt less like a farewell to her husband and more like a performance for their social circle. When she approached them, leading Noah and Nathan by the hand, Mrs. Hargrove barely glanced at her. "You should have kept him home that night," she muttered coldly, her voice sharp enough to slice. Amelia froze. "What?" "If you had cared enough, he wouldn't have been driving so late," Mrs. Hargrove continued, lowering her tone so others wouldn't hear. "But then again, what did we expect? You were never one of us." Amelia's throat tightened. Her husband's coffin was not 10 feet away, yet his own mother's cruelty was already unraveling. She swallowed hard, refusing to let her tears spill in front of them. Mr. Hargrove added nothing, only placing a hand on his wife's arm, as though silently agreeing. His silence was louder than any words. The days following the funeral were lonelier than Amelia could have imagined. She stayed at the Hargrove estate, thinking the family might rally together in grief, thinking they'd help her and the children adjust. But instead, their coldness grew. At breakfast one morning, while Amelia fed the twins, Mrs. Hargrove set down her teacup with a loud clink. "This arrangement cannot continue," she said flatly. Amelia looked up, confused. "Arrangement? You staying here? Daniel is gone. You're no longer part of this household." The words stung like a slap. Amelia's spoon slipped from her hand, clattering against the bowl. "You can't mean that. These are your grandsons." "They are Hargroves," Mrs. Hargrove said, her lip curling. "But raised by you, they'll never rise to their potential. You're ordinary, and we don't need ordinary." Amelia's heart pounded. "Daniel loved us. He wanted us here. Daniel isn't here anymore." The woman's tone was icy. Noah and Nathan, sensing the tension, pressed closer to their mother. Amelia wrapped her arms around them protectively. Mr. Hargrove finally spoke, his voice deep and heavy. "You'll leave tomorrow. We'll have the driver take you to the city. We've already arranged it." Amelia's chest tightened with panic. "Arranged it? I have nowhere to go. I have children, your grandchildren." But Mrs. Hargrove simply lifted her chin. "Then you'd better learn how to survive without Daniel, because you'll receive nothing from us." The next morning was a blur of humiliation. The butler handed her 2 suitcases that barely held her clothes and the children's belongings. Everything else, her wedding dress, family photos, Daniel's personal items, were locked away behind closed doors, declared Hargrove property. As Amelia stood at the grand front steps, clutching her son's hands, Mrs. Hargrove appeared one last time. "You'll regret thinking love is enough," she said bitterly. "Daniel should have married someone of his class. You'll see now what life without him really means." Amelia stared at her, fighting back tears. "The only thing I regret is believing you were capable of love." With that, the driver shut the door, and the car pulled away, leaving the estate behind. Amelia turned to her twins, forcing a brave smile through her breaking heart. "Don't worry, my loves. We still have each other. That's more than enough." But deep inside, she knew the road ahead would test her in ways she had never imagined. The city was not kind to the newly widowed. Amelia found herself standing on the sidewalk, clutching Noah and Nathan's hands, staring at the peeling paint of a run-down apartment building. The driver who had left them there didn't even help with the suitcases. He had simply dropped them off like discarded furniture. The apartment smelled of damp plaster and faint mold. The ceiling leaked in the corner, and the single window rattled against the wind. But Amelia forced a smile for her boys. "See," she said softly, brushing their hair back. "We've got our very own adventure house." The twins giggled, too young to understand the gravity of their new life, and for that Amelia was grateful. The weeks that followed blurred into exhaustion. Amelia sold her wedding jewelry, pieces Daniel had given her on birthdays and anniversaries, just to pay the first month's rent. With the money, she also bought groceries, rice, beans, milk for the boys. Every penny mattered. She took up odd jobs, cleaning offices after hours, waiting tables in the early mornings, even folding laundry at a neighborhood laundromat. At night, her hands ached, her back screamed, but she never let the boys see her cry. Instead, She'd tuck them into bed with stories about their father. "Daddy used to say you two were his superheroes," she whispered one night as the boys drifted to sleep. "And superheroes always find a way." But when they were asleep, Amelia would sit by the window, staring at the flickering streetlight outside, silently weeping into her palms. Life outside the Hargrove estate meant no one treated her like Mrs. Hargrove anymore. At the diner where she worked, she overheard customers whispering, "Isn't she the widow from that rich family? Yeah, the Hargroves threw her out. Must have been her fault." Each word was a dagger. Even some of the Hargroves' old acquaintances avoided her now, pretending not to see her when she passed on the street. The powerful family's shadow was long, and Amelia had no place beneath it anymore. Despite it all, Amelia fought to keep a sense of normalcy for her twins. She walked them to school each morning, holding their hands tight as though shielding them from the world. One day, Noah tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, why don't we live in the big house anymore?" Amelia knelt to his level, her throat tightening. "Because sometimes big houses don't mean big hearts, and we need to be where love lives. Do you understand?" Nathan piped up, "But we have love here, right?" Amelia hugged them both fiercely. "Always. As long as we're together, we'll never run out of love." Slowly, Amelia learned to stretch every coin, to mend torn clothes instead of buying new ones, to make soups last for days. She grew thinner, her once soft hands rough from scrubbing floors, but her spirit hardened in a way it never had before. And though she often lay awake wondering how long she could endure, a quiet determination began to burn inside her. She would not let the Hargroves break her. She would not let her boys believe they were unwanted. And one day, though she didn't yet know it, the truth about Daniel's final gift to her would change everything. It had been almost 6 months since Daniel's funeral. Winter pressed heavily on the city, the air sharp and unforgiving. Amelia wrapped the twins in mismatched coats, hand-me-downs from a kind neighbor, before sending them off to school. She stood in the doorway a moment longer than usual, her breath forming white clouds, her eyes distant. Life had become a cycle of work, exhaustion, and survival. Yet that morning, something unusual waited in her mailbox. A thick envelope stamped with the seal of Hargrove and Associates, attorneys at law. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a letter, typed neatly. "Mrs. Amelia Hargrove. It has come to our attention that the last will and testament of your late husband, Daniel Hargrove, was overlooked during estate proceedings. We request your presence at our office immediately to discuss matters concerning his estate." The letter was signed by Mr. Green, Daniel's longtime lawyer. Amelia's heart raced. She remembered Daniel mentioning Mr. Green once, calling him "the only lawyer in that firm I trust." That afternoon, Amelia sat nervously in a leather chair across from Mr. Green. His office smelled of old books and faint cigar smoke, lined with shelves of heavy law volumes. "Mrs. Hargrove," he began gently, adjusting his glasses, "I need to apologize. Your in-laws failed to present Daniel's will after his passing. I only discovered this oversight while reviewing old files." Amelia's brows furrowed. Failed? Or hid? The lawyer hesitated, then nodded grimly. "It is possible they concealed it, knowing the contents." Her stomach churned. What contents? With deliberate care, Mr. Green slid a sealed document across the desk. Amelia broke the wax seal with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the first lines. "I, Daniel James Hargrove, being of sound mind, leave the entirety of my estate, assets, and holdings to my beloved wife, Amelia, and our sons, Noah and Nathan." Amelia's lips parted, her breath catching. She blinked, reading the words again and again, as if her eyes deceived her. Mr. Green continued softly, "Daniel transferred ownership of multiple properties, investment accounts, and company shares to you. In total, the estate is valued at over $200 million. The room seemed to spin. Amelia gripped the edge of the desk. "200 million, she whispered. Mr. Green nodded. "Everything was meant for you and the boys." Daniel anticipated resistance from his parents, but he trusted me to ensure this will was honored. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. For months she had lived on scraps, humiliated, abandoned, while Daniel's final act of love had been buried. As she left the office, the city lights blurred through her tears. She thought of Daniel, of the promises he used to make. "I'll always protect you. Even when I'm gone, I'll find a way." And he had. Her grief mixed with anger. The Hargroves had thrown her and her sons into the cold, knowing full well Daniel's fortune belonged to them. They had tried to erase her existence, to keep everything for themselves. But now, the truth was in her hands. That night, Amelia sat at the small kitchen table, the will spread before her like a beacon. Noah and Nathan slept peacefully in the next room, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. Amelia whispered to herself, her voice steady for the first time in months. "They tried to destroy us, Daniel. But you didn't let them. Now it's my turn to fight." The night of the Hargroves' annual gala glittered like something from a fairy tale. Chauffeured cars lined the driveway of the sprawling estate, spilling out men in tailored suits and women draped in diamonds. Laughter and champagne filled the air. Inside, the chandeliers blazed above long tables dressed in white silk. A string quartet played softly as waiters floated through with trays of wine. The Hargroves, dressed immaculately, entertained their elite circle with cold smiles and polished charm, as though the family had not torn itself apart just months before. But the gala would not end the way they imagined. Amelia's entrance. The doors opened. Heads turned. Whispers rippled across the hall. Amelia stepped inside, no longer the broken widow they had discarded. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, her hair pinned neatly, her chin lifted with quiet resolve. At her side stood Mr. Green, the lawyer, carrying a folder thick with documents. Mrs. Hargrove's painted smile faltered. "What is she doing here?" she hissed under her breath. Mr. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "Amelia, this is a private event." Amelia's voice rang clear, carrying across the hall. "Private? That's a funny word coming from people who publicly humiliated their son's widow." The crowd stilled. The quartet's music trailed off. Amelia walked toward the center of the room, her heels clicking against the marble. She stopped in front of Daniel's parents, her gaze steady. "You threw me and your grandsons out like we were nothing," she said, her voice trembling only slightly. "But Daniel didn't see us as nothing. He saw us as everything." Mrs. Hargrove scoffed, trying to mask her unease. "You're making a scene. Leave before you embarrass yourself further." But Amelia held up the document Mr. Green handed her. "This," she said, her voice rising, "is Daniel's last will and testament. The one you conveniently forgot to present. The one that leaves everything, every property, every share, every cent, to me and my sons." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guests leaned closer, whispering furiously. Mr. Green stepped forward, his tone formal. "This is legally binding. Any attempt to suppress or alter this document is fraud." Mrs. Hargrove's face drained of color. "That's impossible," she muttered, her composure cracking. "Impossible." Amelia's eyes burned with long-held fury. "Do you know what was impossible? feeding your grandsons with the scraps I had left after you locked us out of our home. Do you know what was impossible? Explaining to them why their grandparents pretended they didn't exist. Her voice wavered, but she stood taller. But thanks to Daniel, I don't need anything from you, because it was never yours to take. The guests now looked at the Hargroves with disdain. A wealthy family, once admired, was revealed for its greed. Business partners whispered to each other. Some turned their backs altogether. Mr. Hargrove's hands clenched into fists. Mrs. Hargrove trembled, caught between rage and humiliation. Amelia took a step back, her voice calm now. You tried to erase me, but you can't erase the truth. Daniel chose us, and his choice will outlive your cruelty. With that, she turned and walked out of the glittering hall, leaving the Hargroves standing in silence, their empire cracking around them. That night, Amelia didn't feel like the frightened widow anymore. She felt like a woman who had reclaimed her voice, and her children's future. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe without the weight of despair. The scandal hit the newspapers within days. Hargrove family exposed in inheritance scandal. Wealthy couple accused of defrauding their own grandsons. The headlines were everywhere. Reporters camped outside the Hargrove estate, shouting questions as Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove slipped through their gates, their faces hidden behind dark glasses. For years, the Hargroves had built their reputation on philanthropy and charm. But now the world saw them for what they were, greedy, heartless, and willing to betray their son's dying wishes. Weeks later, Amelia sat in a courtroom, her twins beside her. She wore a plain navy dress, her posture calm but firm. Across the aisle sat Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove, their lawyers whispering frantically. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber. After reviewing the evidence, including the authenticated will of the late Daniel Hargrove, this court hereby recognizes Amelia Hargrove and her children as the sole legal heirs to the estate valued at $200 million. The gavel struck. The sound reverberated like thunder. Mrs. Hargrove gasped, clutching her pearls as though she were choking. Mr. Hargrove slumped back in his chair, defeated. Amelia closed her eyes for a brief moment, relief washing over her. She wasn't smiling, not yet, but she felt Daniel's presence beside her, as though he were whispering, "I told you I'd protect you." Life changed swiftly after the ruling. Amelia moved her twins into a beautiful home, not a mansion of cold marble and chandeliers, but a warm estate filled with light, gardens, and laughter. She decorated the boys' rooms with their favorite superheroes and built a library where she could read them stories at night. But Amelia didn't stop there. She established the Daniel Hargrove Foundation, dedicated to supporting widows, single parents, and children in need, turning her pain into purpose. Each time she signed a check for a struggling mother, she felt Daniel's legacy live on. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove's world crumbled. Their social circle abandoned them. Invitations to galas disappeared. Their business partners pulled out of deals, unwilling to be associated with a disgraced family. The once feared and respected Hargroves became outcasts, prisoners in their own gilded cage. Some whispered that Mrs. Hargrove was seen walking the empty halls of the mansion, muttering bitterly to herself about the day Amelia walked in and stole everything. But those who truly knew the story said it was never Amelia who stole. It was justice that finally arrived. One evening, months later, Amelia sat in her garden, watching Noah and Nathan chase fireflies under the twilight sky. Their laughter rang out, bright and free. Her heart swelled. They were safe. They were loved. And they would never again feel unwanted. She whispered softly into the wind, "Daniel, we're okay now. You kept your promise." And for the first time since the accident, Amelia allowed herself to smile. Not a forced smile for her children's sake, but a real one, blooming from the core of her being. This story reminds us that greed may triumph for a moment, but love and truth last far longer. Amelia's strength, her resilience, and her devotion to her children turned tragedy into triumph. What do you think? Should Amelia have forgiven her in-laws, or were they beyond redemption? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.